I'm very pleased to be here today in Drogheda and in this particular company and to participate in this public debate or discussion around the theme of women and jobs. When I was preparing this paper, I really could have written about 2,000 words or 2,000 pages on it. It's such an enormous sort of theme that you could address. So I've sort of captured one or two or three things that I think will hopefully stimulate some debate or questions from the floor. I have had, as I said, been very disciplined to put a coherent structure to my piece, and I hope that it's both coherent and interesting. I'm not going to ignore the elephant in the room, and I want to first share some thoughts on the impact of the recession on gender equality in Ireland. I'm deeply indebted to one of my colleagues, Dr. Carol Baker from the Authority, for her analysis and research on this, which is very early and very imperfect at this stage, given the recent nature of the very deep recession that we're in. Consequently, some of this analysis is speculative, and it is nevertheless useful, though, to consider what we have assessed. Prior to the recession, there was an unprecedentedly strong increase in female participation in the labour force. Women not only entered the workforce in greater numbers, they entered a much wider range of jobs than ever before. According to the Central Statistics Office figures, the number of women working in professions rose sharply from 75,200 in 1999 to 116,300 in 2006. This almost created a professional gender balance, as the male professional cohort at that time numbered about 119,000, possibly as close as we ever came to a gender balance in that particular area. In the period that I'm referring to, women also began to achieve career progression in greater numbers than before. One example would be the European Commission report on equality between women and men in 2007, which indicated that just over 30% of all managers in Ireland were women, an increase of 4% in 5 years. Exceptional educational performance and higher educational attainment have also been achieved over the past 10 years, with high entry levels into university or other third-level education based on very high points achieved in exams by the female cohort. So, what's the impact of the economic downturn likely to have on women's participation in the labour market? Most obvious is unemployment and redundancy. This is something that will affect, obviously, both male and females, and it is a serious issue for all. However, our focus here today is on women, so that's what I'm addressing. In February this year, figures suggested that actually women were losing their jobs at a slower rate than men, but most commentators expect that that won't continue. In order to re-enter the workforce, or to be prepared when the recession may turn and we start a growth phase, training resources for the unemployed will be stretched, and unemployment will rise as unemployment rises. And in a situation of fierce competition for scarce resources, it's likely that certain categories of women who have already experienced labour market disadvantage will find themselves further marginalised. In this particular context, I'm thinking of lone parents who statistically have a lesser educational base and much lower employment rates anyway. And this disadvantage could be compounded in coming years by all of those factors, as well as by affordable childcare. Another group likely to lose out badly is older women, who may have hoped to re-enter the labour force after a period of working in the home. In recent times, employment opportunities were available that enabled women to return to work in greater numbers than ever before, but this will not continue in a tighter labour market. This will affect pensions. Already, the Pensions Board has highlighted women's poorer pension coverage, a fact that stems largely from the fact that women tend to take time out of the workforce to care for their children, or indeed parents and siblings. Older women in particular tend to have spent long periods of time engaged in unpaid caring work. As women tend to live longer than men, it's likely that women will continue to experience a high risk of poverty in old age because of the absence of adequate pension coverage. This leads me to reflect on women and pay generally. The Commissioner has already mentioned that only yesterday there was a launch of a joint report between the Equality Authority and the Economic and Social Research Institute, entitled, a rather clunky title, The Gender Wage Gap in Ireland, Evidence from the National Employment Survey 2003. But bear in mind 2003 was probably at the cusp, at the peak of the boom, or at any rate well into the boom. I don't have time today because it is a very dense piece of research, but extremely interesting, and it's on our website and so on and so forth, to give you a description of what this research says. But it does, as the Commissioner said, identify there's a gap, between the wages of men and women. And even when you factor in the various factors that might account for that, such as lesser education or whatever, there's still, even after the 22% is looked at, there's something of the order of almost 10% unexplained gap. So you either look at the extreme end of 20+% or the less extreme end, in and around 10%. One way or another, ladies, it's a gap, and it's a significant gap. The importance of various policy-related factors, as the Commissioner said, such as collective bargaining and family-friendly policies on the wage gap, did narrow that. But I was very, very interested to see that the actual research found, and I'm not sort of making a special pleading to this particular audience, but married or cohabitating men enjoy a wage premium, which widens the gender pay gap. The authors of the report interpret this as reflecting men's much lower likelihood of having spent time out of the labour market for family reasons. This in turn highlights the fact that a key way to reduce the gender pay gap is to facilitate a greater sharing of care for children and other family members between men and women. It's clear that further progress in tackling the gender pay gap requires carefully targeted policies to promote gender equality in the workplace. So what role for the Equality Authority in this? We have a broad mandate to promote equality and to combat discrimination on the 9 grounds covered by the legislation, including that of gender. We're continuing to deliver on that mandate through various equality-related initiatives, including through support for the implementation of the National Women's Strategy and in the promotion of more equal sharing of caring between men and women. In the latter, we're currently funding a project by the National Women's Council of Ireland through research such as the report I have just mentioned, and shortly we will be publishing an analysis of female participation in the labour force. That will be in about another 4 or 6 weeks. Other research that has commenced will look at women's experience in paid work during and after pregnancy. This is just starting now. The purpose of this particular study is to find out about a range of topics, including pregnancy at work, maternity leave, and deciding whether or not to return to work after the birth of a child. Through this, we will be better able to understand the challenges women face and the kinds of services that would help improve circumstances for pregnant women and working parents. I suppose what I'm saying is, if we can't measure it, we can't manage it, and I know that's a bit cliched, but research is a fundamental piece of both the debate and policy framing for going forward, and the authority will certainly be seeking to promote our research policies and the outcomes of those policies as far as we can. We are, as we all know here, in challenging times, and we can expect difficulties and uncertainties for over the coming years. These times will have complex implications for gender equality, and we need to be vigilant that changes being brought about by the current circumstances do not have a disproportionate negative impact on women or men. The Equality Authority will play its part in highlighting the issues of which we become aware, but we all share the task of ensuring that the recession does not become the creator of further inequalities in Ireland. Thank you very much.